3 days into a winter storm, power out, roads closed, temperature dropping. I was the only person on my street with warm, usable light. Not because I'd stockpiled anything unusual, because I still had a box of standard incandescent bulbs I'd bought years before they quietly disappeared from most store shelves. That's what made me start paying serious attention to this pattern. 10 things that used to last your entire life have been systematically removed from the market you have access to. Not banned, not discontinued, evicted, replaced with versions that fail faster, cost more over time, and keep you dependent. This is what that pattern looks like up close, and what you can still do about it. I've been actively prepping for over 20 years. In that time, I've stress-tested systems and gear through 2 extended grid outages, a regional flood that cut off road access for 11 days, and supply chain gaps that emptied local store shelves within 48 hours of a weather event. I've run a lot of equipment, materials, and food systems through real conditions. Some of it failed exactly when I needed it. Some of it has held for decades without question. What I'm walking you through here isn't opinion. It's the result of 2 decades of watching what works, what gets replaced, and noticing that the replacement almost always serves someone else's revenue cycle before it serves the person who has to actually rely on the thing. Start with the one most people have already noticed. Standard incandescent bulbs. The 60-watt household bulb that lit every home in this country for over a century are effectively gone from major retail. The Department of Energy's 2023 efficiency standards rendered them non-compliant. Shelf space went to LEDs. That's the official story. Here's what I've found running both through extended outages. Consumer LEDs fail well before their rated lifespan. The thermal management in cheap units is inadequate. The driver circuit burns out long before the diodes do. You're not buying a 15,000-hour bulb. You're buying a 15,000-hour marketing claim on packaging. The incandescent also has a specific technical advantage most people don't think about until they need it. A tungsten filament produces full-spectrum light with a color rendering index of 100. LEDs average 80 to 90. For assessing a wound, reading a map in low light, or working in a space where accurate color perception affects outcomes, that gap is not trivial. Incandescents still exist. They're sold through specialty suppliers. I keep a supply. They're the backup to the backup, and they're 50 cents a piece. Walk down the body wash aisle of any major pharmacy. Count the bar soaps. Count the liquid body washes. That ratio completely inverted over 30 years. It didn't happen because consumers decided bar soap was inferior. In 1987, Unilever ran internal consumer research and found that bar soap was perceived as unsanitary, not bacteriologically demonstrated, perceived. The company didn't try to correct the perception. They funded its amplification. Marketing spend shifted toward liquid body wash. A multi-billion-dollar category was manufactured from near nothing. The math is simple. A bar of soap costs 50 cents and lasts 30 to 40 uses. Body wash costs 3 to 5 times more per equivalent use. Requires a plastic dispenser that eventually fails and spoils faster than a dry bar once opened. In any supply disruption scenario, a 10-pack of unscented bar soap stored in a cool, dry location covers one person for most of a year. No hardware required. No refill. Bar soap also hardens and cures over time in storage. It doesn't degrade. The hygiene marketing was never about your hygiene. This one took me years to fully understand, and I say that as someone who has cooked on cast iron for decades. I own a modern Lodge skillet picked up at a hardware store. I also own a 1930s Griswold No. 8 I found at an estate sale for $12. They are not the same tool. The Griswold has wall thickness of 3 to 4 millimeters. The Lodge runs 6 to 8. Thinner walls mean faster heat response and better searing. More importantly, the pre-1950 manufacturing process involved machine polishing the cooking surface after casting, producing a finish smooth enough to function genuinely non-stick without any chemical coating. That process was abandoned in the 1950s when manufacturers switched to faster sand casting. The pebbled surface on modern cast iron is a byproduct of the cost reduction, not a design intent. A Griswold from 1935 is still in active daily kitchen use today. 90 years. No failure mode designed into it. The modern equivalent won't survive that timeline. It wasn't built to. Estate sales, thrift stores, and online resellers are where this equipment lives now. The price is often lower than anything sold new. PTFE nonstick coatings, Teflon being the most recognized name, replaced cast iron and carbon steel in millions of kitchens starting in the 1960s. The convenience case was real. Easy food release, fast cleanup, low-fat cooking becomes more practical. Those advantages existed. What wasn't on the label was the manufacturing chemistry. TFE production required PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid, a processing compound that accumulates in human tissue and does not metabolize out. It's been classified as a possible human carcinogen by the EPA. DuPont's internal research identified health concerns in manufacturing workers in the 1960s. That research stayed internal. The compound remained in production for 4 more decades after those findings. PFOA was phased out by 2013 under EPA pressure. It was replaced by Gen X PFAS compounds that are still being evaluated. The pans are still nonstick. The gap between removed from the process and confirmed safe is not visible on any houseware shelf. There is no label for it. In my kitchen, cast iron and carbon steel are the permanent tools. Nonstick is a guest with a limited stay. Stone ground whole wheat flour, bran layer intact, wheat germ intact, no synthetic re-enrichment required, was a grocery standard through most of the 20th century. Today, it's shelved in the specialty section at a price premium. The standard flour aisle is enriched white flour, grain stripped of bran and germ during milling, then synthetically supplemented to approximate what was removed. The supplementation doesn't restore what was lost. It approximates it. The reason for the substitution wasn't nutritional science. It was shelf life. Whole wheat goes rancid because of the oils in the wheat germ. Remove the germ, and you extend the product's time on the shelf by months. Lower spoilage loss for retailers. Higher margin. Your nutrition was downstream of that calculation. For long-term food storage, there is a genuine trade-off. White flour stores longer. I keep both, and I made that decision with full information. Regional mills and online suppliers carry stone ground whole wheat. The standard grocery aisle never offered you a reason to go looking. Between 2008 and 2010, 17 states passed legislation targeting phosphate runoff into waterways. The environmental concern was legitimate. The reformulation that followed put a low-phosphate detergent on consumer shelves that performs measurably worse on hard water and baked-on residue. Here is what most people don't know. Professional-grade phosphate formulations are still sold to restaurants and institutional kitchens through commercial supply channels. The product was not eliminated. The consumer market was handed the inferior version. The gap was never explained on the packaging. If your dishwasher has been performing worse for the last decade or so, that's the timeline you're working within. Commercial restaurant supply distributors carry the original formulation in bulk quantities. It's not restricted. It's just not marketed to you. This follows the same pattern as everything else on this list. When you bought a washing machine or a lawn tractor in 1975, it came with a complete service manual, wiring diagrams, parts breakdowns, torque specs for every fastener. A competent person with basic tools could diagnose and fix nearly any failure. That documentation was part of the product. Modern manufacturers treat service documentation as proprietary intellectual property. John Deere spent years in active legal disputes with farmers who wanted access to the diagnostic software required to repair their own equipment. A farmer who owns a $400,000 combine cannot legally repair a sensor error without a dealer visit. The repair is physically possible. The access has been legally walled off. structured to route all service revenue back through authorized channels. I maintain a printed, hard copy library of service manuals for every major piece of equipment I own. Laminated where moisture is a concern. When the grid is down and internet access is unavailable, that documentation is the difference between a functioning system and an expensive wait. iFixit maintains extensive digital archives. Equipment-specific forums hold service documentation that manufacturers would prefer you didn't find. Download it now. Not when you need it. A functioning shortwave receiver pulls in Voice of America, BBC World Service, and dozens of international broadcasters without a cell tower, a satellite subscription, or a Wi-Fi connection. The signal travels by ionospheric skip, bouncing between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, crossing thousands of miles. In a regional grid failure or communications blackout, it still works. Physics hasn't changed. Consumer electronics retailers stopped carrying shortwave-capable receivers around 2010 to 2015. The category shifted to specialty suppliers and the amateur radio community, a device that delivers reliable information from across the world with no subscription and no corporate intermediary, has no viable revenue model in the subscription economy. That's not hidden. That's a business calculation made in the open. I've carried a shortwave receiver in my kit for 15 years. During one extended regional outage, it was the primary way I tracked what was happening beyond a 30-mile radius. The Texan and Grundig product lines are still available through specialty online retailers. If your setup doesn't include one, the gap is larger than most people recognize until it's relevant. Every component of a mechanical watch has a name, a function, and a replacement source. A Swiss movement from 1960 is still fully serviceable today. A watchmaker can clean it, re-oil it, replace worn components, and return it to within 5 seconds per day of accuracy. No battery, no firmware, no update that bricks it, no platform that sunsets. It runs on stored mechanical energy and geometric precision alone. Quartz movements replaced mechanical watches commercially beginning in the 1970s. Quartz is accurate to within 15 seconds per month against mechanicals 5 to 10 seconds per day. On raw accuracy, Quartz won. But a quartz movement cannot be repaired when the integrated circuit fails. When battery corrosion reaches the movement, the watch is replaced, not fixed. In a scenario where battery resupply is interrupted for an extended period, a mechanical watch is not a hobby item. It's functional infrastructure. I wear one daily, not for nostalgia, because I've worked through what happens when watch battery supply disappears for a year and planned accordingly. This last one isn't a single product. It's the category that contains all the others. Physical ownership of media, of tools, of information is being systematically replaced by access. You used to buy a film. Now you license it on a platform that can remove it without notice and without refund. You used to buy software. Now you pay monthly for the right to use it. In 2009, Amazon remotely deleted purchased copies of George Orwell's 1984 from customer Kindles following a licensing dispute. The irony was widely noted. The practice continued. Permanent ownership terminates the customer relationship. Access perpetuates it indefinitely. In any disruption scenario, licensed software stops working when the authentication server is offline. Your streaming library disappears when the company restructures. Physical media, physical books, and locally stored files work without any of that. I own the things I depend on. Hard copies, printed manuals, physical media, hand tools I can maintain myself. That is not a lifestyle preference. That is the operational baseline. The pattern across all 10 is identical. Every replacement is less durable, less repairable, and more dependent on ongoing purchases than what it displaced. The originals were permanent, owner-controlled, and non-recurring revenue. That is precisely why they were replaced. Manufacturer dependency is not a side effect of the system. It is the product. You can still source almost all of these. Estate sales carry cast iron and mechanical watches in better condition than most new items sold in the last 20 years. Commercial supply distributors carry phosphate detergent in bulk. Stone-ground flour ships from regional mills. Shortwave receivers are a search away. Service manuals for older equipment live at iFixit and on equipment-specific forums. Physical media, physical books, and hand tools are at thrift stores every weekend. Nothing here is behind a lock or a law. It's behind silence, behind the distance between a specialty supplier and the nearest retail shelf, and behind the assumption that if something isn't being marketed at you, it must not exist or must not be worth having. Physics doesn't negotiate with marketing budgets. A tool designed to last a century doesn't know it was supposed to fail. The knowledge of where to find these things and why they matter is worth preserving. That's what this channel is here to do.